First, I would like, thanks, Miles. I wanted to welcome you all and thank you all for joining us for our third session of MAE's first virtual summer webinar series. My name is Aubrey Gilliland and I'm a member of the MAE Board of Directors, and we also have Miles McNall, our board president, on the webinar as well. So as many of you might already know, we were planning to hold our 25th anniversary in-person conference in May, which was unfortunately canceled by the pandemic. But despite that, we are really grateful that we have our presenters here who were able to quickly adapt and provide their sessions using this online platform. So before I turn it over to Mary and Ramona, I just want to go over some housekeeping. So this session will be recorded and we will be uploading it to our website within the next week or so. You may have noticed that you are muted, so everyone has been muted upon entry but is able to unmute themselves if needed. Please feel free to use the chat box. We will have somebody monitoring it if you have any questions or concerns or comments. We will also be sending out a post evaluation, so keep an eye out for that after the session. And then we also have 3 more scheduled sessions. So please go to our events page on maeeval.org for more information. So now I'd like to introduce today's presenters, Mary Mattson and Ramona Perry from Emergence Collective. Emergence Collective is a woman-owned collective consultancy committed to using intentional collaboration and emergent strategy to design participatory engagement and learning processes. Primarily based in Southeast Michigan, their interdisciplinary team includes experts in social work, public health, data management, and human-centered design. With individuals coming from diverse professional backgrounds and life experiences, they work together with a flat, network-based organizational structure under the assumption that their work will only be successful if it reflects equity, justice, and collaboration. So I will turn it over to you two.
Thanks, Aubrey. It is nice to see some familiar faces. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We're really excited to talk culture with y'all. I'm gonna share my screen real quick. Aubrey, can you give me a thumbs up if you see it? Cool. Okay. All right, so to get us started and make sure our technology is working, we're going to do introductions in the chat box. So if we could do your name and what organization you're with and the size of your organization. And if that's number is 1 because you're a sole proprietor, that's okay too. So go ahead and pop that in the chat box. Mixture. Hey, Ebony, Santrell, good to see ya. This is great. So kind of a mixture of a lot of larger organizations, which is pretty cool. A couple single consultants. We want a lot of the information we'll run over we think is applicable to internal teams, but also to project teams. So for those folks who are sole proprietors, if you want to kind of switch your lens to thinking about how some of this may be applied to project teams, it may be helpful as well. So thanks for the introductions, everybody. Before we dive in, yeah, keep adding. If you haven't done the introduction, feel free to keep adding that in the chat. We'll look back on that. So we want to just tell a little bit about Emergence Collective before we dive in. So like Aubrey said, we're a woman-owned multidisciplinary team based in Southeast Michigan, but working across the country. And EC started about 3 years ago, the way most fun ideas do, over beers. We had several colleagues who had previously worked somehow with Sue Ann Savis, who is kind of who many of you likely know, and we met through some kind of network through University of Michigan graduate schools, and we like to think that we were pulled together by shared values and a shared vision of thinking through what it would look like to create a consultancy that was deeply rooted in intensive collaboration and equity. So we've slowly grown over the last 3 years. We have 3 full-time members, 1 part-time, and then a team of advisors and subcontractors that we work with and pull in as subject matter experts in projects. And we see evaluation and strategy as core elements in organizational development. And so most of our work lies at that intersection. It is embedded in emergent strategy, developmental evaluation, and participatory approaches. So for our context today, we are not coming at this as culture experts. Something that we've loved about being able to start our own organization is being really intentional about culture. And as many of you, we also share the belief that evaluation should be in service of equity, but we work under the assumption that we can only practice equitable evaluation externally to the extent that we seek to have an equitable culture internally. So our hope for today is, change this slide, I kind of skipped through some of this. This is our team. Sorry I didn't show this earlier. Not all of these folks are full-time with us, but some are advisors, some are subcontractors, and some are full-time team members. I meant to show this earlier. This is a brief, just kind of visual of our approach to our work. And we'll send the slide deck out after. But yeah, like I said, we're not coming at you as culture experts. We were hoping to share some of the learnings we've had over the last couple of years. We hope you walk away with some new ideas and tools to bring back to your teams or your project teams. We realize that there's not often a lot of time to reflect on culture and culture development and where we are as organizations. So we're hoping that a large portion of our time today can be spent reflecting together and making some new connections. We're going to be using a shared collaborative worksheet in breakout rooms that we hope can facilitate some connecting outside of this workshop. And so on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Ramona to dig in.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, okay, awesome. So before we dive all the way in, can you go back a slide, Mary? I think there we go. Thank you. So before we dive in, we wanted to just get our juices flowing and thinking about organizational culture and the organizations that we're all a part of. So we're going to launch 2 polls and we would love your feedback. You'll see it come up on the screen in a moment. The first is asking about whether or not your organization has well-articulated values and beliefs. So are you aware of the values and beliefs of your organization? Are they articulated well? And the second poll that you'll see is asking more about whether or not those values and beliefs are lived out. Do they manifest in the work that you do? Do you see those values and beliefs in your day-to-day work, in the way that you work with each other, in the way that your teams work and are organized? So as you see the polls, feel free to go ahead and respond to them. And then we'll very quickly review the results and then dig into the rest of our discussion today. I'll give 1 more minute for responses. See them still coming in. A few more coming in. Okay, let's stop there. So for our first question about whether or not our organizational values are well articulated, it looks like most people agree that there are well articulated values and beliefs in their organization. And that's the start, that's where we begin. So it's good to see that. And as we reflect a little bit later, we can think more about what those values and beliefs are and how well they are actually lived out. So that'll be our next question. As you see it, feel free to respond. Okay, I see results coming in. Okay. And so as we think about our question about whether or not these values are lived out or actualized in our culture, we see almost a 50-50 split, just about. Slightly more people are saying that they agree. Many are saying they don't. For those of you who agree, as we get to our reflection time, we'd love to hear more about what those values are and what your approaches are to living those out. And for those that disagree, this would be a great time for us to connect and reflect and think about how we can build in ways to actually reflect the values and beliefs that we have into our culture. So thank you so much for participating. This helps get our juices flowing and think about the rest of the session, how we can participate and how we can support each other's growth and discovery. So I'm going to stop sharing that poll. So one thing we wanted to touch base on before we dive in is this idea of an equitable organization. So in evaluation in general, equity has been something that has been central to our work, especially recently, and being an equitable organization also has been. And so when it comes to us and the way that we develop our culture and our goals toward development of our culture, there's been this idea of wanting to be or trying to be an equitable organization. And for us, we often don't think about ourselves as being an equitable organization, but rather always being in pursuit of being an equitable organization. And so we really focus in on the journey and the process more so than the end goal of being an equitable organization. And this allows us and has allowed us to really focus in on our processes. What do we care about? Why do we care about those things? And how do we demonstrate those things from day to day? And how are we inching closer every day, every year, every month, et cetera, toward being an equitable organization? And so as we go through, later on, we'll talk about some of our specific ways that we do things. We'll talk about our company culture. We'll discuss some specific facets of it. And in doing so, remember that our goals are really more toward becoming an equitable organization and being in that process at all times. And also understanding that equity can look different for our organization over time and staying in that learning and growth mode as we engage company culture. Thanks, and I'll pass it back on over to Mary to speak a little bit more about that detail I mentioned a moment ago.
Thanks, Ramona. And so as we see, as we think about culture, we're thinking about it in this journey towards equity as we think about it internally and then reflecting that externally. And so as we are evaluators, we like frameworks. And so while we're not so linear, we really appreciate having kind of a way to conceptualize this. And so there's lots of frameworks out there, lots of experts in org culture. And so we're not trying to replace that, but just share how we've kind of thought about our development internally in hopes that it may resonate with you. So we really believe that at the core of developing culture is our values, assumptions, and beliefs, and that being explicit about those things, what they are, and revisiting them and reflecting a lot on how they are expressed in different ways in our organization is really important. And so we have that at the bottom of really being grounded in what are our values, assumptions, and beliefs. And we think that those values, assumptions, and beliefs are reflected or expressed in kind of three different buckets. So behavior and rituals, more the informal and tangible pieces of how individuals are interacting with one another, what are their rhythms that flow in the day and the weeks and the year of the organization. So that's one bucket. The second is people and relationships. So who's on the team and what's the quality of relationships between people, which we think is one of the most important aspects. And then the third is structure and processes, which are these more tangible pieces of our organization, policies, decision-making process that are clearly seen and that can reflect these values or not reflect them. And we think these three buckets are kind of what makes up culture, and we see all of that within this larger journey of trying to move towards equity internally. So what we're going to do is share a couple examples of how we're trying to express our values in these three buckets, and then we'll break out and kind of hear from the group. So I won't spend much time on this, but these are our guiding values. So collaboration, courageous justice, excellence and continual improvement, accountability and integrity. We're in the process of developing principles. We've incorporated or done a lot of more work on principles focused evaluation with partners. And before we started that, we developed some different activities and piloted them internally. And from that, we are in the process of finalizing some principles. And it's taken us some time. We're a year in now in that process, and we anticipate that they'll kind of build on our guiding values. But what's been interesting is that the process that we've been on in developing those principles have allowed us to kind of consistently revisit how these values are being lived out in our day-to-day. We also do Friday reflections. So each Friday we have a reflective prompt. And often a revisiting prompt that we use is what's a value that's been expressed in this week. So we'll each pick something that was very tangible, that was an expression of how these values played out, which we think is an important aspect of keeping them in the front and center and reflecting on how they're actualized in our team. If you're interested in talking through some of the principles development, we'd love to hear your thoughts and or share with you the exercises that we work through. So I'm happy to talk offline about that. And from there, I'm going to turn it over to Ramona for a minute. Let's see, she may not be on her screen, so there you are. Great.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
Thank you. So when we think about company culture, one of the things that we focus in on is the organizational structure and processes. So what is the structure of our organization? What are the processes that we embed in the day-to-day work that we do? What are those more tangible aspects of our organization? And how do they work in service of our goals in terms of developing a culture that's toward equity and a culture that honors the individual needs of those who are working with us, our friends, our colleagues, et cetera. So there are several ways that we, as an organization, try to engage structure and processes toward this end. I won't go over each of them, but I will discuss maybe two of them for now. So one thing that we do and we have been working on is a compensation structure that's organized as a wage matrix. And so earlier on, when Mary was speaking, she may have mentioned that the way that our organization is currently structured is that we're all on a flat pay system where we're all at the same level when it comes to pay. And we've been really trying to think strategically and thoughtfully about, as we develop a wage matrix, what does that look like? And how do we offer the changes in compensation in ways that are equitable and thoughtful? How do we honor lived experience outside of simple education? How do we develop ways to compensate based on the ways that we value other facets of one's identity and other facets of what one brings to the workplace in terms of experience and in terms of value? And then not only are we thinking about it in that way, but we're also making sure that this process is transparent. And so every member of the team, all the way down to our interns, are aware of our processes in terms of how we're thinking about this, and can be a part of the decision-making as we develop it. And so once we have that in place, it's something that's been considered collaboratively. Another thing that we do is that we think about our organizational structure and path to ownership in a similar way. Right now, there are 3 owners, and the 3 owners are the 3 women who developed the organization from its start, and Mary kind of mentioned the origin story a bit earlier. But there is a path to ownership that is transparent and that is possible. And so people who are joining the organization, even part-time, are made aware of and are able to engage in the prospect of ownership should they be interested. And that path is one that allows for the gradual growth of these team members and also allows for what's the word I'm looking for? Of course, my words are going to escape me as I'm actively speaking. It allows for growth, but also allows for a feeling of joint ownership even before someone is an actual owner in the organization. And so I can speak for myself as a part-time employee that while I'm not an actual owner, I am a part of decisions. I am able to engage very actively. And so that path to ownership allows for team members to actually feel what it feels like to make decisions and engage as an owner before they actually are in that space. We also have shared agreement on policies and open books and transparent financing and accounting, which I won't dig into, but there are also important aspects of our organizational structure and process.
Thanks, Ramona. We wanted to acknowledge that some of this is unique to having a smaller team and the way that we're structured. And while many organizations have been established for a long time, it's, a lot of these things it's more challenging to embed them, but we think that they can be tweaked or adapted in ways that it can apply to your context. So if you're interested in chatting about that, we'd love to be a brain partner, thought partner with you in it. I want to talk a little bit about people and relationships. We see this as one of the most important aspects or buckets of culture. Our team is always fully remote, so we don't have an office space and we are spread out a bit. So we don't get to be in person too often. And so this has been a point of not tension, but growth, certainly, of figuring out how do we develop really quality, high quality, vulnerable, authentic relationships in the midst of being virtual. And it just takes a time and an investment, and we find ourselves kind of in this point of tension between things that need to get done, as we all know, and taking time when needed to just have relationship building time. And that sometimes looks like walk and talk. So especially now when everyone is virtual, we've embedded this more of just taking time to schedule 30 minutes in the calendar and get outside and walk and just catch up, hear about what people are learning, reflect on what they've been reading, and just build relationships. We have weekly team meetings, and part of that is always checking in with the team on different prompts. So folks will rotate on who creates a prompt, and it's geared towards just building relationships. So maybe, how are you doing generally? What are you doing to care for yourself? What's something interesting you've been learning? How have our values been reflected? And we just really, after time, and you do that every week, it's a good rhythm of building those relationships. The other piece that we've built in is quarterly team retreats, where we spend a good portion of that doing a team building activity, and we're happy to share those out if you're interested in learning more about what those may look like. All right. The last bucket is rituals and behaviors. So these informal and formal practices that make up our culture. And I think the most important thing I want to mention from this is feedback. So something that we were really wanting to be very intentional about as we started Emergence Collective was embracing healthy conflict and trying to embed feedback loops consistently, so that we were, one, growing as a team together, but also having formal and informal ways that feedback was consistently part of our culture. So one way we've done that is weekly feedback. So each week we have 15 minutes where we prepare feedback for ourselves and a teammate. So we'll rotate each week with someone new, and the prompt is, we'll come prepared with 2 things that I'm doing well, 2 things I could be doing even better, and the same thing for your teammate. So 2 things they're doing well, 2 things they could be doing even better. And we try to keep the ratio always more towards what is going well than what could be better, to reinforce that. And I will share in the chat, we pulled this exercise from the Management Center. For those who are aware of it, it's a really great resource. I'll share it in the chat in a minute, once I'm done sharing my slide deck. But it's a great resource, and they have a lot of other activities and resources to pull from. So I think regardless of the size of your organization or project team, if there is one thing that has developed a space of continual growth, and a culture where we can be honest and invested in one another's growth, and also be consistently encouraging each other, this practice and routine of feedback, I think, has been the most important for us in developing that kind of a space. And if you're interested in talking through that, we'd love to talk through it with you. Ramona, anything else you want to add on either of those 2 slides?
I think just to note that, we are focusing in on these three areas, so behavior and rituals, people and relationships, and structures and processes, as three facets that have been central to the way that we've built our particular company culture. But those of you who are at, these very large organizations, there may be some other facets of your company cultures that resonate as really important for the way that your organization functions that might not necessarily perfectly align with the three that we've laid out. But as we move into the next activity, we'd still be interested to learn and hear about if there are different ways that your organizations are considering culture or focusing in on culture. We'd love to hear about that. But just to share that these are the three areas that have really been central to the way that we build culture and allowed us to successfully consider a culture of learning and also a culture of inclusion and equity across our teams.
Thanks, Brenna. I think the last thing I'll mention from this slide is collaborative decision making. So this is something that we are trying to formalize a bit more on our team, but everyone that's involved with Emergence Collective has their voices at the table when decisions are made. And so it's another piece of what we feel is really important to joint ownership and ensuring that folks feel embedded in the direction of the company and also embedded and involved in the decision making. We really believe that regardless of the size of the organization, that's really important, of hearing voices that may be able to contribute a different lens to how decisions are made and what's being made. And yeah, we're happy to go into more detail if anyone's curious to talk more about what that might look like. So on that note, we kind of want to shift to allowing space for you all to reflect and share collaboratively. So what we're going to do is break up into breakout rooms. I'm going to give a brief explanation. I'll share a worksheet with you in the chat. And there'll be 6 groups. So groups 1 and 2 are going to be, let me share this with you now. You'll see your, easy for you to follow if you have the link first. To you now. So when you get the link, go ahead and open it. So breakout rooms 1 and 2 will be, you'll see will be on people and relationships. 3 and 4 will be on org structure and process, and then 5 and 6 will be on behavior and rituals. So we hope this time is just kind of a reflective space for you to think about where you are as an organization, but also hear from others, what they're doing, practices and tools they may have that we can share. We're hoping that this can be a point of connection. So as you're writing down ideas or tools or resources you may have or practices that you have as an organization, feel free next to that to write your name and/or org if you're interested in someone from the group or from our workshop today to contact you and talk through it. We would love for some of those connections to happen outside of our hour here. I think it'll be easiest if there's just 1 or 2 note takers per group, just so there's not too many folks typing. Once you get started typing, it should be okay, but just to get started, that'll probably be the easiest. And we'll be in here for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll come back, do a brief share out, and then we'll close out. Before we jump in, we didn't leave space for any questions on what we reviewed. We're happy to take those now or put it in the chat. Does anything come up before we get into breakout rooms of what we talked through that anyone wants to hear more about or is curious to ask now before we jump into breakout rooms?
So to respond to Ebony's question, you can type right in the worksheet. And there was a question from Emily asking if we could share our team building activities.
Yeah.
Which we're happy to do.
Totally. We'll follow up with some of those in the follow-up email that Aubrey can send out to the group.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else in there, Ramona? I don't have the chat up.
No, nothing else, but just to clarify for everyone, as we go into our breakouts, if you could choose a single note taker and they'll take notes based on your reflections directly into the worksheet. And so we'll all be in there, but hopefully one person from each group can be actively writing directly into the worksheet. And then we'll review a little later.
Thanks, Ramona. All right, Aubrey, whenever you're ready, feel free to break us out.
All right. See you back in a few.
Hey, this is good. We're still here with you.
I think I assigned you a room.
I didn't get an invite to a room.
Oh. Okay.
I had left more space for questions after each of those things. Did that feel kind of fast? Run through?
I don't think so. That's weird that you didn't get. I have you in a different room. Poor Michael.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
Okay.
Someone by themselves?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. We did have a couple people drop rooms, so we do have a few people dropped out. Oh. Should we admit? Oh. You're on mute. I can't hear you.
Did she go away or did she join a breakout room?
Nope, she went away.
Really? She got frightened and ran away?
She probably saw two people in here and thought, oh.
It's not me. I'm on her dissertation committee. She took one look at me and ran away.
Oh, really? Ah, yikes. You would think that she would then be, want to stay because she knows you. I think it's okay that we have a couple groups that have only 2 people in them.
I guess. How did that happen?
Well, there were several people that had dropped out.
Oh, really? Okay.
I had 3, at least every group had 3 people. And then a couple groups. There's only 5 groups because one group, there wasn't enough people to do 6 groups. So.
Do you think people were expecting more evaluation and less about the company?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, it's interesting. But I did have that reaction, like, oh, this is mostly about how they run their business.
Yeah.
So what my questions would be, if we had some open conversation is, you mentioned emergent strategy as being, a guiding approach. Tell us about what emergent strategy is. I've been hearing about this. There's a book called Emergent Strategy, and apparently the idea was developed by a well-known science fiction writer named Octavia Butler. But some people have run with it. And one client I have is a huge fan of it, and I haven't gotten around to reading it, and I should. And the other thing is human-centered design. I know a little bit about that, but I just, if they're going to be talking about how they operate and why they present themselves not as an evaluation firm, but as a firm that supports, learning.
Mm-hmm.
Why that approach?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Let me look at the document. Their questions are. I think they have good questions. Like, what indicators are of strong relationships to a team? So be interesting to see what people say in here. So the recording doesn't record the breakout rooms, does it?
No,
Okay.
it's actually recording us having this conversation.
Oh, okay.
So you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask someone in my office to edit it for us.
Okay. That sounds good. I guess if we do the recording, then we can continue recording when everyone returns.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a downside of recording a session that has breakout rooms.
Yeah. You would think that there would be a way for them to figure out how to record that. The polls went smoothly,
They did?
so that was good. Are we going to send out, do we have an evaluation for the presenters? I think we talked about it, but I would be curious to get feedback from the presenters to hear how they feel like the Zoom platform and all of these different capabilities went.
No, and that reminds me, we should put the link to the evaluation in the chat at the end.
Yes, yep. And I will.
You have that available?
I do have it up, yep.
Okay.
So I will drop that in there, and I will thank you for polling the participants, by the way. I had no idea how to do that. Did that come from Wild Apricot, or where did that come from?
Yeah, I can show you how to do it.
Okay.
Do you have administrative login ability?
Yeah.
It's to Wild Apricot, so you can log in to the admin view.
Okay. I don't know. I've never even been onto Wild Apricot, so let me see if there is this like this spreadsheet that Adrian had put together.
Well, I can if you want to hang around after this, I could do a brief demo.
Okay.
I haven't been in Wild Apricot a lot, but you know, actually, when I went in yesterday, it was super easy to find what I needed. It took me a total of 2 minutes.
Oh wow. Okay, that's good.
Super easy.
Yeah, that would be great. So then from that, I will use that list of participants to send out an email the post evaluation.
Okay.
Also, and I think whatever resources that Mary and Ramona want to share, we can send that out too. And then there weren't a ton of questions, but if they want, have you ever downloaded the chat? Like all of the chat?
Yeah.
You have? Okay. Is that relatively easy to figure out how to do?
So yeah, if you go to the chat, open it up, and then over on the right-hand corner, you see those three dots.
Oh.
Click on that,
Okay.
and it says Save Chat at the top.
Okay.
And so what that'll do is it'll download it to your computer, to your desktop.
Okay. Very easy.
Mhm.
Cool. And the recording is going to the cloud, correct?
Yes.
Or is it going to your personal? Okay.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, it's going to Zoom.
Okay.
So we have to make sure, given our informal conversation, that should not be part of the public record,
Yeah.
that we edit this before we send it out.
Yes. Yep.
I mean, I wasn't really thinking about it. So when Tatiana Bustos came on and then quickly departed, my comment about being on her committee,
Yeah.
other things like that shouldn't.
Shouldn't be broadcasted to the public.
No. I don't know though if you pause it, if you stop the recording, whether then it would, and you restart, it would be two separate files.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I'm gonna do a quick Google search and see.
Let's see what's going on in the chat. So they said 15 minutes, and we're probably about two minutes away from that.
Are we? Has it already been that? Wow.
I wasn't keeping exact track of the time, so but I thought it was around 10:30.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But we can send a message.
Yeah, it looks like they're, yeah, group one has one question left, but the other groups look like they're finishing up their last question.
Yeah, I see breakout 2 and 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
Breakout 5. Oh, breakout 5 and 6. Yeah, they are.
Mary did say, I don't know if you had stepped out at this time, but she did say that she would text me when they're ready to come back.
Okay.
So
then you would just click close breakout rooms.
yeah, then I'll just close breakout rooms and
Here's
oh,
me.
bless you. Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking up how to edit the Zoom recordings.
Okay. I'm trying to find if there's information about what happens when you pause it. Oh, okay. So so if we pause the recording and start it again, Zoom will record to the same video file for the recording segment. If you stop recording and start it again, a new video file will be created.
Okay, well, clearly we should have paused.
Yeah. But that's good feedback for us to know for the next 3. Do you want me to pause it right now? Or just, we've already.
Sure.
Welcome back, everyone.
Thanks, Aubrey. I'm going to get my screen up in a minute. I think some people are still typing, so sorry to cut off any good conversations that were happening. I'm going to get my screen up and then hand it over to Ramona for some share out here.
I should have given some warning. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. We were coming up on time. I wasn't a shot at you at all. All right, let's see here. Ramona, take it away when you're ready.
Oh, okay, yeah. Thanks everyone for participating. I'm looking through this document and there are just so many great examples in here, just so much really thoughtful feedback and ideas. And so I'm just grateful for everyone being able to take the time to offer their thoughts. What we're going to do now is just take some time to hear from you all. We had been doing a lot of talking earlier in the presentation, and so we'd like to hear what some of our thoughts and feedback and ideas were that came out of this session. And I'll start with breakout rooms 1 and 2, people in relationships. And so I see majority of the notes here, it looks like from breakout 2. So is anyone from breakout 2 interested or would like to share? Oh, is someone still typing in there? Like to share some of your ideas about what maybe some of the indicators of strong relationships are on a team. And I see some great ones here. From breakout number 2. Anything compelling come out that anyone would like to share?
1 and 2, feel free to jump in.
1 as well. I don't see the 1, but yeah, 1 as well.
I'll try to mumble through it. I was telling them that I had my wisdom teeth taken out on Monday.
Oh, goodness.
Like,
so good, Ebony, for having your wisdom teeth out.
Thank you, Ebony.
But so they were talking about one thing that kind of came out is the idea of supporting each other as a team, and so that kind of carries across all 3 questions about being willing to share feedback and support each other in different ways. So for example, one of us talked about 360 reviews, where You have reviews by supervisor and leadership and external contractors, like annually as part of your annual review. You know, opportunities to share feedback in staff meetings. We also talked about that as being part of kind of a strong relationship too, supporting each other's growth and relationship building. And then when we ended, we were kind of talking about how to maintain that kind of informal relationship building in the virtual world, in you know, thinking critically about how we can do that more.
Thanks, Ebony. I was just also looking to your point on just this like more time to chat, like, which has been lost in the virtual world. That just resonates with me, of like this time, informal time to chat, and we just don't have that as much. And so I didn't see any specific ways that may happen. This looks like time before or after a meeting, building in that time. But the walk and talks for us has been helpful, and meet before and after meeting times as well. But it's tricky.
Yeah. That's something that also came up for us. We were in group 5. Hey, group 5. And something similar came up in terms of we were thinking about behavior and rituals, informal behavior and rituals. And one of those things being that time to chat, that time to be able to converse in the office, even informally, and how now in the virtual space, there are limitations not only to that ability, but also to people's bandwidths. I mean, you just don't necessarily have the same bandwidth anymore to engage. And so we chatted a bit about that too. And something that came up for us was thinking about how our company culture can be reflexive and adaptive to what people are actually needing in the moment. And so, you know, if we're not able to have that cooler talk or things of that nature, how can we find other ways to keep people informed without having to be in meetings if that's not where people are at the moment? And so sometimes there can be facets of the culture that we wish to protect from when we were in person that might not necessarily be feasible. We may have to change it. And so we talked a bit about that, having an adaptive culture that can adapt to what we might need right now. Any other thoughts, group 5? Did I summarize that okay from what we discussed?
Yes, you did well.
Thanks.
I'm curious.
Thanks.
I saw feedback in a couple of places, and I forget where I saw it, but someone wrote down the willingness of leaders or leadership to receive feedback or ask for it. So I'm wondering if there's anyone on the call who is in a leadership. Well, we are in our own leadership roles and organizations, but within a hierarchy that may exist. If you have any thoughts of how you've seen that be effective, of leaders inviting feedback or facilitating a space where that's welcomed and used. No takers yet? Or have seen the opposite of spaces that have leaders not being willing to, or not facilitating a space for feedback and the impact of that. If anyone has a reflection on that, I'd love to hear it.
You can also chat it out if you'd like to put it in the chat.
All right. No takers. I'm trying to, if there's anything else, Ramona, we want to highlight before we wrap up here in our notes. We'll share out this document at the end as a follow-up from Aubrey. So folks can review notes, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to highlight.
Yeah, I think one thing that we talked about is in our group, it was shared that there was a term called gap teams that I thought was really interesting, that I think would be useful to share out to everyone, where if there was a problem or something that arose within the organization or within a particular team, there was a gap team that was assembled from folks across the entire organization who would then come together to brainstorm about creating a solution for that particular issue. And so rather than the solutions coming from the leadership down, the solutions came from within the organization, from folks across the entire org. I thought that was really just interesting to think about in terms of how we can take collaboration and expand it even when it comes to problem solving, when it comes to preparing solutions across the org, and when it comes to internal issues and problems. So someone on my team shared that, and I thought that was really great, and wanted to share that out to everyone.
That's cool. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
All right, well, we are wrapping up. Want to be cognizant of everyone's time. We'll follow up on a couple of the chat questions, send out this document as well as a slide deck. And feel free to reach out if there's any things you are interested in talking further on. And I'll hand it over to Aubrey for any closing MAE remarks.
Well, thank you both, Mary and Ramona.
Yeah.
This was a great presentation. We're excited to hear more and see more about the comments from the breakout rooms. I just posted the link to the post-evaluation form in the chat. So if you all could take a few minutes to complete the evaluation, that would be really great. We would really appreciate that. I will also be sending it out via email if you accidentally close out of this and don't have access to the link. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to maeval@gmail.com or directly to Mary or Ramona.
So we love nerding out about this stuff. So anytime you want to reach out, you'll have our emails to both Ramona and I. Thanks for joining, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks
everyone.
so much, everyone.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop the recording.
I was saying it.